da, St Andrews. It's Miss Thomas here with today's pre-recorded session. I'm going to continue reading our class novel, Who's Afraid of the Bwgan-Wood? Chapter 8, Life is Complicated. Gramps was in hospital having a checkup. Tatty and Dio discovered this when they called at his bungalow one evening and found him packing pyjamas and shaving things into a little suitcase. Who across the road got it down for me this morning? Wanted to pack it for me as well. No, I said. I can do my own packing, thank you very much. I'm not mental yet, I told her straight. He didn't like the lady who came in to clean. Although he was much too proud and stubborn to say so, he was actually very glad of the Bwgan-Wood's help. The effort of fetching what he wanted from the bathroom and the airing cupboard had made him breathless. What's a hospital? Said Dio. Gramps looked even sourer and grumpier than before. Miserable old place, he said, where they put no hopers like me when they want to get rid of them for good. Tatty was frightened. What? Like a prison or something? Like an iron cage? Gramps saw straight away that he'd said something very silly. Don't be so daft, girl. Take no notice of a grumpy old fool like me. He sat down creakily and went on to explain. It's my chest, you see. They want to give me a checkup, give me injections and that, to keep me on my feet over the winter. Normally, I'd be back home after a couple of days, but this time that nurse of mine's gone off on her holidays. Won a trip to Tenerife in a competition. So they're going to keep me in there till she gets back. Then, remembering what he'd started out to tell them, he added, hospital's a place where sick people go to get well. Oh, said Tatty dubiously. I don't suppose you'll have time to come and see me there, will you? Gramps said, scowling ferociously at them from under his bushy eyebrows. So, of course, they went. They were getting quite confident about exploring the town these days. They followed Gramps' instructions and arrived at a huge concrete building with hundreds of windows, all looking exactly the same. It doesn't look very nice from the outside, does it? Said Dio nervously. In front of the hospital were a few strips of muddy, trampled grass with sickly shrubs dotted here and there. Between the shrubs stood row upon row of parked cars. The lingering exhaust fumes made the Bwgan-Wood sneeze. Perhaps it's better inside, said Tatty, not very hopefully. They floated up the front of the building and began peeping through windows looking for Gramps. To their surprise and relief, the inside of the hospital was much, much nicer than the outside. Lots of humans in bed, of course, some lying down and looking much iller than Gramps did, even on his bad days. Other humans seemed quite cheerful and were sitting up in bed and talking or reading magazines or watching television. There were bunches of flowers everywhere, in vases, and fruit and chocolates and bottles of squash on the tables next to the beds. The television sets were high up on the wall where everybody could see them. All the big rooms had pretty curtains and flowery screens. One of the smaller rooms they peeped into had a carpet and comfortable chairs and a drinks machine, and another one even had a real snooker table. Tatty and Dio had watched snooker on Gramps' television, so they knew all about it. They found the children's ward with its toys and its brightly coloured pictures on the walls, and on the next floor they saw a nursery full of very tiny human babies in cribs. Nurses in stiff white caps hurried up and down the corridors. Once, a child in bed looked startled and a bit frightened, until Tatty grinned and waved at her. But apart from that, Nobody paid any attention to the two Bwgan-Wood. They were completely invisible. Gramps was in a long room on the other side of the building. Getting in posed a bit of a problem because all the big windows were shut. Eventually, the Bwgan-Wood found an open door on the next level and oozed through. Gramps' ward was as bright and pretty and as full of flowers as any of the others. But Tatty and Dio could see straight away that the humans in it weren't happy. Everybody was very old. There weren't many visitors, and nobody was laughing or chatting. Gramps himself wasn't in bed, but he was wearing his pyjamas and dressing gown, without his flat cap, which made him hard to recognise at first, and he looked twitchy and bored. Some of the other old men seemed just as grumpy. Others just looked very sad. And many of them had a strange blank expression in their eyes, as though they'd stopped noticing anything and didn't care what happened to them anymore. Nurses in green uniforms were handing round cups of tea and trying to chat brightly to the patients. Some of the people they talked to smiled and replied, but the moment the nurse went away, their faces went blank and sad again. "What's the matter with them all?" Tatty asked, horrified. Gramps shrugged. "Old age, mostly. Some of them have been here for years. I'm lucky, d'you see? I got a home to go back to, and relations in the same street, and a row now and again to keep the adrenaline going. But they haven't got anybody. Nothing to look forward to, d'you see? Just eating and sleeping and watching the television day in, day out. And that's no sort of life when you've been active, is it?" One or two of the old people showed a faint flicker of interest as the two Bwgan-Wood hovered beside Gramps' chair. "Can they see us?" "Dunno," Gramps said. "Some of them, maybe." Tatty looked round the room with its orderly rows of beds. "Don't they ever have any fun?" Gramps shrugged again. "There's a day room back there where you can play cards and chat, and the trolley comes round with the papers every morning. Plenty to do if you can be bothered to make the effort. But most of them have lost interest like. Fair play, them nurses do their best, I'll give them that, but no. Something a bit different, that's what they need. Bit of real entertainment, bit of a shock. Something to take them out of themselves like." Gramps was right. The ward was warm and comfortable, and the nurses were kind. But humans, like Bwgan-Wood, needed more than that. "I wish we could do something," Dio said. Tatty stared at the old men. Through the open door of the day room, she could see old ladies looking just as despairing. "What, though?" "I don't know," Dio confessed. "Pity Eldon's not here. He could do some real magic to cheer everybody up." An idea was taking root in Tatty's mind. Suddenly, her eyes began to sparkle. "But we don't need magic, not really." "What do you mean?" "Why don't we entertain them all by ourselves? We could bring a lot of magical things along, like Mammy's flowers or Esylt's doves, and do a magic show all on our own." Dio's jaw dropped. "But they wouldn't be able to see us." "That's the whole point." Tatty's idea was firmly rooted now and growing in all directions and blossoming like mad. Derwin could teach us some tricks if we asked him nicely. He might even lend us those butterflies of his. We could borrow all sorts of things from people, and Gramps could pretend to be the magician. And not seeing you and me would make the whole thing look like real magic. Dio remembered Tatty's sheet and how frightened the big boys had been at the school. But if Gramps were to wave his hand and garlands of shining flowers began to waft mysteriously through the air, and ribbons and silken scarves began to dance around the room all by themselves, accompanied by clouds of butterflies, his face lit up. "Let's do it, Tat. Let's give 'em a magic show." Gramps was nodding encouragingly. "Gee, that's a good idea, that is." "Right then," said Tatty. "How about Thursday? That'll give Dio and me 3 days to practice." All at once, Gramps became dubious. "Let's get this straight. You want me to stand up on my hind legs and make a monkey out of myself in front of all this lot while you two jump about, right?" Gramps was shy. "Oh, come on, Gramps, you'll be great. We'll tell you exactly what to do." "You were the one who said it was a good idea." "Good idea," Dio reminded him. "Aye, well." Gramps harumphed a bit. Then he braced himself. "All right then, long as we do it about 8:30 at night. Don't want the whole hospital up here watching, and I won't say nothing to the nurses, just in case. You two just turn up and we'll do the show on the spur of the moment like." They'd been so busy planning the show that they hadn't noticed the nurse who was heading their way with a worried expression on her face. She bent over Gramps' chair. "Are you sure you're all right, Mr. Evans?" Gramps gave her 1,000-kilowatt scowl, one of his fiercest. "Never better, thank you." Then, when she'd moved away, still looking puzzled and concerned, he murmured, "Though, if they catch me talking to you too much longer, I'll be stuck in here for good. Off you go now, Thursday night, 8:30. All right?" As they flew home over the wood, Dio began to have second thoughts about giving a magic show. Suddenly, the whole idea didn't seem nearly as brilliant as it had back there in the hospital ward. What if it doesn't work? What if nobody'll lend us anything? What if it's no good and nobody likes it? Like Gramps, Dio was having an attack of stage fright. "Oh, come on, Dio, it doesn't have to be a proper show, like on the telly with singing and dancing and all that. Most of them won't even see us. Gramps can just wander about making magical things happen, and if we can make them funny as well, it'll be even better." They spent the rest of the night thinking up tricks to entertain the old people. By morning, even Dio was enthusiastic again. "You're right, it's going to be fun," he said. Next day, Warren and Ellery and Bethan and Sally Ann came home from school with exciting news. There was a national competition for the best primary school project on nature and wildlife, and their school had entered for it. To get the project off to a good start, the 2 top classes were going on a nature ramble with their teachers, so as to find out about the countryside in autumn. They would all be going by bus to one of the farms high up above the Cairo Valley. And after looking round the farm, they were going to split up into groups and walk down through the Cairo woods, collecting things and making lists of the wildlife they saw, and learning to recognise trees. Miss was bringing 10 pairs of binoculars along so that everybody could watch birds. Even tough boys like Warren in the top class were looking forward to the outing, because Sir had promised to bring his very expensive video camera with its close-up and telephoto lenses, and was going to let the biggest and most sensible people use it and show them how to cut and edit the tape afterwards. They were all to take anoraks and wellies and a packed lunch, and also a box with holes in the lid to put specimens in. Miss had said that a plastic ice cream tub would do very nicely. David was the only one of the Mostyn Close children who was left out, because he was in the next class down. The ramble was fixed for Thursday. Meanwhile, Tatty and Dio were beginning to discover just how complicated life can be when you're trying to organise something which has to be kept a secret. It meant borrowing things from people and telling them, not lies exactly, just carefully snipped off bits of the truth. We just want to practice a kind of magic show, that's all, Tatty explained. And then, of course, everybody wanted to know when the real show was going to be put on and whether they could come too. It was all very awkward. Oh, I wish we hadn't promised Gramps now, Tatty said despairingly. I had to tell Nino we'd do the show next week for her and Tide. Is she going to bake us the honey cakes though? Dio wanted to know. They'd decided that they ought to provide refreshments as well. Oh yes, she's baking a whole batch on Wednesday. I told her, Tatty added guiltily, that we were going on a picnic with some friends. The Bwgan house too knew that something was going on and kept nudging them and tickling them to make them tell. Oh, I'll be glad when Thursday's over, said Dio gloomily. In fact, as they soon discovered, their problems had only just begun. As they were on their way to bed in the chill dawn of Thursday morning, Mammy announced that she and Daddy were going away for the day to visit some friends and their new Bwgan house on the far side of the mountain. Growing a new Bwgan house is a very important occasion for Bwgan-Wood, and everybody's friends call in to help and to wish it luck and long life. We'd take you with us, Mammy went on, except that it's a very long way and you'd get dreadfully tired. Anyway, weren't you planning to go on a picnic? Oh yes, said Dio. Good, that's settled then. Nino's offered to come over and look after Bwgan Babi for the day and keep an eye on things generally. I want you to help her as much as you can, and especially with Bwgan Babi. Normally, they didn't mind playing with Bwgan Babi and running errands for Nino. But today of all days, their hearts sank. When Tatty and Dio woke up a few hours later, Mammy and Daddy had gone, and Nino was already bustling round the Bwgan house. She was full of plans for the day. First of all, you can help me do some more baking for this picnic of yours. I'll need cowslip flowers and rose nectar, and some more of my special honey. So I'll give you a list and you can pop out and fetch them from my Bwgan house. Then perhaps you could give Bwgan Tide a hand with the garden. Then, after lunch, we'll take Bwgan Babi for a little float in the wood. What time did you say you were meeting your friends? Oh my gosh! Tatty groaned when Nino was safely out of earshot. And I was going to make garlands this afternoon with Mammy's flowers. We've got to pick up Derwin's butterflies and Esyl's doves sometime today too, said Dio. Oh, well, I suppose we'll fit it all in somehow. But he didn't sound too hopeful. After lunch, Nino decided to have 40 winks. Bwgan Babi was already asleep in his cradle of leaves. Keep an eye on him for me, will you? When he wakes up, we'll take him out for some fresh air. The moment Nino's eyes were shut, Tatty and Dio dashed round to the garden at the back of the Bwgan house and began making garlands. It took a lot longer than they'd expected, and Mammy's magic flower bed looked a bit bare when they'd finished. I didn't think we'd need so many. What's she going to say when she sees it? She won't mind, said Tatty, crossing her fingers and hoping. They hid the garlands in a friendly pine tree near the quarry and hurried back home to check on Bwgan-Babi. He was still asleep. Nino was snoring gently, and the Bwgan house itself was snoozing comfortably in the warm October afternoon. Outside, the sun was shining and the leaves were golden in the wood. This is ridiculous, said Tatty, after she and Dio had hung around for a while, waiting for somebody to wake up. We promised to be at Dewin's this afternoon. If we leave it much longer, he might be out. Dio glanced irritably at Bwgan-Babi, who hadn't moved since they'd looked in on him earlier. Might as well nip over there now, he suggested. It won't take more than a few minutes. So, feeling rather guilty about it, they went. Dewin was a dwarf, so old and gnarled and wrinkled that he looked like an ancient tree stump. He lived in a grove of rowan trees on the other side of the Cairo Valley, and he was a clever magician. His butterflies were all ready for Tatty and Dio to take away, in cages of woven grass. The butterflies were huge, as big as thrushes, and had beautiful velvety wings in all the colours of the rainbow. We'll be ever so careful with them, Dio told him earnestly. Dewin stroked them lovingly. I'm sure you will, he said. If they get excited and fly off, just whistle and they'll come back to you. They're excited already, aren't you, my pretties? Now, why don't you both sit down and tell me what this magic show is all about, and I'll see if there's any of that strawberry cordial left. I hope you enjoyed the next chapter of the book and look forward to sharing what happens next in another session next week. Keep up all the hard work you're doing at home. Keep safe, and I'll see you soon. Da bo chi!